All right, good morning, gentlemen. Today is Daf Uf Tes in Mesachas Pesachim. So we left off at the bottom. We're discussing the different shirim or the shir for the Arbakosos. So we left off 4 lines in the bottom, last word on Kuf Ches Amud Beis. Taner Rabbanan Hakol Chayavin BaArbakosos Holu. Echad Anashim, V'echad Nashim, V'echad Tinakos. Right? So all are required, are obligated to drink 4 cups of wine for Leil Seder, men, women, children. So Amar Rabbi Yehuda v'chima toelas yesh litinakas b'yayin. What's going on here? Why? What benefit, right, does a child get from drinking wine? Right? I know Kasha is not so good nowadays, right? Children enjoy many fine wines, right? But what point does somebody who's a child, right? They don't feel the cherus. It's not a good feeling, right? So what point is it? So Ella mechalkin lahen klayos ve'agayzim erev Pesach kadei shelo yishnu v'yishalu. Rather, instead of doing that, in other words, part of the dalikosos, right, is they don't need the dalikosos for that. So rather, we go ahead and so they give out nuts and grains, right? Roasted grains on Erev Pesach, right? So doesn't really mean Erev Pesach. It really means Leil Seder. In order that they should stay awake, right? They shouldn't fall asleep and stay awake. They're exciting, right? Some of you have the minhag nowadays, sort of Nevensel, right? I think there was brought down maybe from Rav Shlomo Zalman, give out chocolates, candy, right? Something to basically keep them awake and have them be at the Seder in order to ask, hey, what's going on? Why is this different than our normal Shabbos meal? And then you get into the Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. So therefore, so it could be that the point of also for the children drinking all the wine is for them to ask, what's with all the cups? And Amar Lov Rabbi Akiva said, Rabbi Akiva Shahayim Mechale Klayos Ve'Goyz in the Tinakas Be'er Pesach Kadei Shelo Yishnu Ve'Yishalu. And Rabbi Akiva, he had this minhag, right? He used to go ahead and give out these like toasted grains and nuts to children and Pesach, Leil Pesach, in order that they should not fall asleep and they should ask. And Tanya, Rebbe Eliezer, Eimer, Chaytvin matzos b'leil psachim b'shvil tinokas shelo yishnu. They used to go ahead and they would take away the matzos, right? Some say this is the source for taking away the Seder plate, right? Covering, we remove stuff from the table, right? In order that they shouldn't fall asleep. In other words, they should be puzzled and say, hey, what's going on here, right? That's all part of the Leil Seder. And Tanya, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Miyamav Amar, he get Eis Lamod beBeis Hamedrash, Chutz Me'erev Pesach v'Erev Yom Kippurim. Says Rabbi Akiva, he never told people to leave the Beis Medrash except for 2 times during the year, on Erev Pesach and Erev Yom Kippur. Erev Pesach b'shvil shetinakas kadei shelo yishnu. In other words, on Erev Pesach, which could mean the night of Pesach, once again. In other words, they shouldn't, in order that they shouldn't fall asleep. In other words, if they, I guess, were, and actually there's a different lashon in the Gemara in Sukkah, right? But it says over there that basically they would have to come to the Beis Medrash. In other words, they would have to leave the Beis Medrash to go to Leil Seder to discuss Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, and they shouldn't miss that, if they just learn and then, go to sleep. And Erev Yom Kippurim, Kadei Sheyachlos B'neiim, and also in Erev Yom Kippur, in order they should go ahead and feed their children, or they themselves should go ahead and eat on Erev Yom Kippurim because they have to fast that evening, and it's a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. Fine. Taner Rabbanan, around a third of the way down on Kuf Tes Amud Aleph. Chayiv Adam lisameach banav b'nei beiso. The regel of one is obligated to go ahead and make his sons, right, and those of his household happy on a holiday. Shneimar Zbalik says v'samachta b'chagecha, right? You should rejoice, right, on your holiday. So with what do we make them happy with, right? How should we make them happy? So b'yayin, with wine. So. And Rabbi Yehuda says, Anashim baroi lahem, v'nashim baroi lahem. Right? No, that which is fit for the men, which is fit for them, and women which is fit for them. Anashim baroi lahem, yain. Man, which is fit for them is with wine. And v'nashim b'mai, and with whom with what? So Tani Rav Yosef, b'bavel, b'biktei tzvaydim. And right in Bavel, I guess, with colored clothing. Beretz Israel, b'biktei pishtan meguatzin. Right? Those were the, I guess, linen garments. Nice linen garments. That was what they enjoyed in Bavel. So in other words, the clothing would make them happy, and therefore clothing for women and for the men, right? It would be wine. Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer, Bizman shebeis hamikdash kayam ein simcha al-basar. When the Beis Hamikdash was around, the simcha was the basar from the karbanos. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, "V'zavachta shlam v'yachalta sham v'samachta l'fnei Hashem lakecha." So it says over there by the Shama Simcha. It says over there that you shall go ahead and sacrifice your shlom, your offerings, and you should eat it there, and you should rejoice. So you should rejoice by eating it. With eating it there, with eating the basar of the karbanos would bring a simcha. However, now shein beis hamikdash kayim, there is no beis hamikdash, ein simcha el b'yayin. Right. So we don't just say it wasn't just the meat on its own. Right. It was the meat as being part of the karban. But now they can't just have a barbecue. So rather, the simcha is b'yayin according to our Gemara. There's other Gemaras would say also b'basar b'zman azeh, the whole machlokes. So it says over there that a wine will make the person's heart happy. Fine. Omer Rabbi Yitzchak, now 2/3 of the way down. So kasta de marisa de havi b'tzipori. So the kasta, that was a measuring cup of marisa, the type of fish that they had in Tzipori. He havis kimin luga de mikdasha. That was the same size as a lug in the base of mikdash. And over there, right, they didn't have abundance of wine. So they used to go ahead and fill up this one kli, right? This kasta. They fill it full of wine, which is the same as a lug, right? Now we say that we talk about a revis, right? Revis means a quarter, a fourth, right? And what is it's a fourth of what? A revis is a quarter of a lug. So therefore, they would fill up this kli, right? Because it would be a full lug. And then, then they would basically divide that in four, right? Pour that in 4 cups, and therefore you have now 4 revios of wine, and that was how they would measure out on Pesach, right? Because they didn't have a lot of wine, so therefore this is a perfect way of measuring. And Amr Rabbi Yechanan, he says no, they have a different way. Timnyasa kedamaisa the havi b'Tveria havi yisera alda revia. The timnasa, also another measuring cup that they had in Tveria, right? The older one that they used to have in Tzveria is more than our current day one by a revis. All right. So therefore, basically, if you take the old one, right, and you fill it all the way to the top with wine, all right, then you would pour into the new kli, because the new kelim are smaller by revis. You pour it into new kli until the top. Once it's finished, there's still a little left because the old one was larger. So whatever's left, and since it was larger by revis, therefore that is the perfect measure of a revis. Fine. And with that, they used to go ahead and measure out a perfect revis for Pesach. And Amr Rav Chizda says, Rav Chizda, revis shel Torah, etzbaim, al etzbaim, barum etzbaim, v'chatzi etzba, v'chaimesh etzba. Right, now we're getting into the math. So let's talk about a revis. How much is revis? What is the value? Right, so talk about the volume of revis. So how do you figure that out? So if you have a cube, okay, which is etzbaim, right, 2 fingers. So it's 2 by 2 by, right? So let's say the base and the width is 2 by 2, and the height is a little more, is 2.5, right? Etzbaim 2.5 and 1/5. Okay, so if we go ahead and we have a fraction of 1/2 plus a fraction of 1/5, right? You make them both out of 10, so it's 5/10 and 7/10, 5/10 and 2/10, because 1/5 is 2/10. So 5/10 plus 2/10 equals 7/10, right? So it's 2.7, right? 2.7 is the height. So it's basically 2 by 2 with the height of 2. So it's a little higher. So that is, and if you go ahead, you take 2 etzba by 2 etzba by 2.7, you fill that with wine, right? Now you have a perfect revis. The Kedatani is what it says. V'rachas b'mayim is called basar. A person should go ahead and wash his entire body, right, in the water. So shelo yeh davar chaytz ben basar l'mayim. And also we learn over there that shouldn't be anything separating between him and the water. He should be completely submerged in the water. And b'mayim b'may mikvah, and as called basaro. So in other words, there shouldn't be anything between him. And then when he should be in the mikvah, there shouldn't be his entire flesh. It's called basar of mayim. Shgal gufo oila behen. That his entire body should be able to fit in there. And how much does a person fit? What space does a person need a size for it to be submerged in? So we say, I'll turn the page. Amal barum shloish shamos. 1 by 1 by 3 is the average size of a person. So imagine, let's say, like a bathtub, right? 1, right, by 1. So that is basically the height right? The height is 1, person's not so fat, by not so wide, and then he's long, approximately 3 amos, right? Which is, I don't know, closer to 6 feet. So therefore, 1 by 1 by 3 is the amount that a person could submerge and be basically covered with the water, right? The shir chachamim, shir mei mikvah arba'im sa. And the chachamim have basically been mishayir, have measured out that the measurement of a mikvah is 40 sa. All right, so now what's going on here? What's all this math? Honestly, I don't know what this, I didn't even understand this chart of the Rashbam, those who have the art scroll, right? So ignore that, but I will explain outside the cheshbon, all right? So now we know the size of the space in terms of measurements. So we said 1 by 1 by 3, okay? Now let's think for a second, right? 1 amma, so how many, because we talked about etzbos, the mountain of Revis is an etzba, right? So how high is it in terms of etzbos? So each amma is 6 tefachim. Each tefach is 4 etzbos. So therefore, an amma is 24. Okay, so 24 etzbos is the height. 24 etzbos is the width, and that was 3. All right, so which is 24 plus 24 plus 24, which is 72. All right, so in terms of etzbos, right, this mikvah of 40 sa, right, which you know is 40 sa, is 24 etzbos by 24 etzbos by 72 etzbos. Now, so that was the size. Now, how much liquid is in there? Because we want to get back to Revis. So we said the starting point is 40 sa. So if you have 40 sa, all right, now of a sa, so which is a sa is 6 kav, right, and a kav is 4 lugan, right. So therefore, that is right 4 times 6, right, is 24, right? 4 times 6 is 24. And then a revis of a lug is 4 of those, so therefore it's 96. So therefore there is 96 revios, right, in a single saw. All right. Now there's 40 saw in this mikvah, in this space that we discussed. So therefore it comes out to 3,840 saw. And we said, what is the cubic, right? The cubic feet, or not cubic feet, the cubic etzbos, right? Or is how much? So we said 24 by 24 by 72, which is 41,472. So if we divide, right, and that is the amount of cubic etzbos. So if we divide that by the amount of revios, so how much etzbos do you need to be in, to basically to fill the 41,472, right? You have 3,840 revios filling this whole entire space. So you divide it 41,472 divided by 3,840, and it equals 10.8, right? 10.8 revios, right? Or 10.8, excuse me, cubic etzbos. So if you do 2 times 2, so times 2.7, right? That equals 10.8, which is the same amount as we said earlier. So that's how we know, right? Where did they get this number of 2 times 2 times 2.7? So it comes from this equation, because we know how much water revios are in here, right? And we know the total size. So if you divide out how much revios fit in, so each little cube, if you take, right, since you have all those revios, if you take 3,840 etzba, 2 etzba by 2 etzba by 2.7 and fill it up, that will fill it out. So it comes out that's how do you know it's 2 by 2 by 2.7 is through this cheshbon of figuring out how, 1 by 1 by 3 is 40 sa. All right, if that's clear, great. If it's not, you can ask me after shir. And then apparently the Rashbam has a different way of calculating it, but I didn't use that cheshbon. I went with the simpler math, right? Because it was show your work, and I couldn't do it. Fine. Omar Rav Ashi. So moving on, second line from the top. So Omar Rav Ashi, Amar li Ravin Barchinino Shulchan Shel Mikdash Shel Prakim Havi. Right, the Shulchan of the Mikdash must have been able to take it apart. Why? If you thought that it was basically one fixed piece, so then when you go ahead and you put it in, right? So it was 2 it was too long, or not too long. It was too almost long by one, right? So you can't go ahead and put something, submerge something which is one tefach thick in the space which is one tefach because there's no room on the side. So therefore, it had to be been able to take apart because it was too large to submerge in a 1 by 1 by 3 at a time. So you couldn't do it. So how can you go ahead and be table, right? So, and maybe you ask, okay, why don't you put it in diagonal? If you put it in diagonal, you get more space, right? So then some say because of the thickness of it, some of it would not be submerged. So my kusha, the Gemara says, what's the kasha? Who says maybe it did go apart? Perhaps it was the Yam Shel Shlomo that Shlomo Melech made. He made off the Azara. He made a much larger mikvah. The Tanya Reb Chia Yam She'asa Shlomo Machzik Meya v'Chamishi Mikvah Tahara. Right, it was able to hold 150 mikvahs, and therefore, so it was much larger. Therefore, if for whatever reason the Shulchan became Tomei, they were able to go ahead and be Toivel it all as one piece. Fine, 2 dots. And then we said, we should not go ahead and give an ani even less than dalet kosos. The Gemara says, how could the Rabbana be misaking something which is a sakana, right? Which then could be dangerous to a person. But Tanya, we learn in a brayse that says, lo yochel adam trei v'lo yishta trei v'lo kanech trei v'lo yasid tzarcha trei, right? So we know there's a concept of the zugos, right? Zugos is a concept of the Gemara. If you do things in pairs, there's shadim. There's some sort of sorcery that could be associated with that, and it depends why you do it. So a person shouldn't do things in pairs. A person shouldn't eat 2 of something, or shouldn't drink 2, right? Or he shouldn't go ahead and basically wipe himself twice, or or have relations twice, right? All these things are zugos. So how can we say, right? 4 is, 2 zugos, 2 pairs. So how could the Rabbanim be talking 2 pairs? So the Gemara gives 3 terutzim. So the first one is Amar Rav Nachman. Amar Kar, the pasuk says Leil Shimerim. It describes the night of Pesach as the night of guarding, right? Leil Shimerim. So Leil HaMishumar Ba'amin HaMazikin. So therefore, since we are protected from Mazikin, from any sort of shadim, therefore we're not concerned with zugos. And Rav says Koshel Bracha Mitzaref LaToiva Mitzaref LaRa. Right? Koshel Bracha. Right? Koshel Bracha is the kos al the Birkas Hamazon. So that the third cup, the Birkas Hamazon cup, is actually not something which is added as it doesn't add to raw. So it's not a case of it's 3 plus 1, which is 4 zugos, because no, it's only latova, and therefore it's just basically 3, and then there's 1, and neither of which is zugos, and therefore it's not mistaref l'ra to make it a zugos. And finally, Ravina Omar Arba Kasi Taknina Rabbanan Deracheros. Right? No, the Rabbanan were masaking basically 4 cups to do it, but for Deracheros and Kol Chad V'Chad. And each one of them was mitzvah be'apei nafshehu, right? So it's a mitzvah on its own. In other words, the first one is kiddush, right? The second one, you make the bracha of Gal Yisrael of the Agoda, right? Third one is Birchas Hamazon. Fourth one is Halal. So there are really 4 independent mitzvahs. It's not a case of having the zugos that happens to add up to 4, but each one is really independent on its own, and therefore it's basically 4 individual cups versus 2 sets of pairs. All right, we'll stop here at the top. Everyone should have a wonderful day and enjoy the nice spring weather. A little windy, but